What's going on, y'all? Sean here with Transform Your Physical Health Live. I don't know why something feels weird with this. Anyhow, yeah, hopefully you guys are doing well. I haven't done this in a couple of days, but that's only because um it's only because I've had things going on at at my child's school, and then I had a couple meetings on Monday. So but I'm here and here to answer your health and fitness questions, also to talk about an interesting topic in health and fitness, specifically longevity. Now, this that I'm going to read from today is kind of nerdy a little bit, um, but again, it's about the bigger topic of longevity, aging, and whatnot. So a lot of people are starting to say, like in science and whatnot, they're starting to look at that, starting to look at aging differently. Sorry, y'all, my cords and stuff are in the way. We're starting to look at aging differently and kind of see aging itself as even somewhat of a, as like a disease rather than like an inevitability, more so like a disease process in and of itself that doesn't have to be the way that it is. Because typically when we think about longevity, we think about, well, you just kind of get older and everything starts to wear out, and it's just again, it's inevitable. It's just a natural thing, all this kind of stuff. This is how we've seen it. You get a certain age and things start dropping, and you start having to struggle with your memory a little bit, and you can't move like you used to. But you know a lot of science and even just kind of like practical demonstration from people who take care of themselves shows that a lot of what we thought as aging is not really, it doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't have to be that way at all. Actually, you can maintain a very, very large amount of function well into your older years. I saw a guy, I don't know if it was this Russian guy or an Asian guy, like doing like 20 good pull-ups or more than, it may have been 20, and he's like 70 something years old. I may have seen one from each nationality. Well, come on now. Pull-ups. So it seems like a lot of what we thought of as aging is just more so, in my observation, in my opinion, it probably is better attributed to just an accumulation of damage done over time to the body, and it's a great lack of inactivity that we kind of think, well, you know, it's just I'm just getting older, but no, we just kind of stopped doing different kind of things, and we had decades in of not providing our bodies with proper nutrition, and so that has an effect. However, what I want to talk about today is this study I came across. Like I say, the study's a little bit nerdy, but it's kind of talking about aging and longevity and what these scientists discovered about longevity. I will say this: it mentions one thing that I think a lot of people already know now, for sure today, that which is that longevity, like studies suggest that longevity, and caloric restriction are, that caloric restriction can positively affect longevity. And I think most of the studies on that have been done with like some sort of worms or something in lab environments. Um, I'm not sure if studies have been done on humans, but studies suggest that caloric restriction actually does positively affect longevity. So, that's talking about that, it's talking about fasting, but also talking about just generally lowering how many calories you eat, which flies in the face of the way that we do as a society, which is we eat all the time. Like we eat, multiple meals a day, multiple snacks a day. The digestive system doesn't really get a whole lot of rest, um, in the way that we do things. But anyhow, this study, the title of it is Longevity Linked to Proteins that calm overexcited neurons. So basically, what it's saying in this study, and you can look at this if you're interested in it, but it was they were doing studies um that were showing that there's like a overexcitation of neurons in the brain that seem to be associated with a shortening of lifespan. And also, in some experiments that were done on, it says, roundworms, mice, and human brain tissue, there was a protein found called REST. I don't know what that acronym stands for, but we'll just say REST since it obviously looks like that. Which it controls the expression of many genes related to neural firing, also controls lifespan. The studies show that boosting levels of the equivalent of rest REST in worms, like the equivalent protein in these worms, lengthens their lives by making their neurons fire more quietly and with more control. Okay, and so I know another part of this article said that when they boosted this protein in these worms, it doubled their lifespan, which of course is kind of like amazing and weird at the same time. But it's kind of think about the doubling of lifespan um in a human, you know, genetic potential is, apparently 120 years, so that's 240, and then like our estimated what you call it, life expectancy in this country, oh, excuse me, somewhere around 77 years old on average. So that's like about 150, 154, I think. Um, it's a long time, at least now it is. Let's see what else the study says. So this protein called REST, called REST, it apparently turns certain genes off, and um, let's see, it inhibits the production of some proteins um, and channels that are involved in how neurons communicate with each other. When one neuron fires, it releases a flood of neurotransmitters that excite or inhibit the firing of the next neuron down the line. But rest inhibits the production of some of those proteins involved in the process. So it reins in some of the excitation of these neurons. Um, and apparently, the people who conducted this study, they saw in the brains of long-lived people, they have unusually low levels of the proteins that are involved in excitation, meaning that they probably had less neural firing than people who lived much shorter. Um, Another thing that they saw was that patients with neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's, dementia, stuff like that, they have lower levels of the rest protein. So again, I think this is very, very early on. The article did make clear that they don't really see any sort of practical kind of protocol that people can do to kind of boost this rest protein. And then they're also saying it doesn't mean that you need to think less or whatever. It's not really, it doesn't make sense. That's not like causing the overexcitation, I guess, or we can't assume that. Um, However, people are really starting to kind of see how some of these mechanisms of aging work. And apparently, they also said this is somehow related to the insulin IGF-1 system. So, if you know anything about insulin, insulin is what's created by the pancreas that helps your body to use glucose that comes from food. IGF-1 is a growth factor that's associated with helping things grow in the body, for lack of better words and whatnot. And a lot of times both of those can be associated. They're needed and necessary, but in the body of a person who eats very unhealthy, then you know high levels of insulin a lot of times are associated with a diet that is very high in sugar, um, and in simple carbohydrates and whatnot, and it signifies maybe a pancreas that's really working hard to try to get that stuff down. It could be somebody who, if they're not careful, end up with pre-diabetes, diabetes, something like that. And IGF-1, whenever it's kind of, I've heard of that being even associated with, um, issues like cancer and stuff like that, just because it's a growth factor, which sometimes, it just has to be in its proper place, for lack of better words. But anyway, I say all that to say this: longevity, the way that we've kind of looked at it, or I say aging, the way we've looked at it, there's there are things that happen that actually will, contribute to one living longer or living shorter. Like I said, the caloric restriction part, that's one of those things that science is becoming more and more clear on. That all this eating that we've been doing is probably one of the things that is detrimental to our health. I wouldn't be surprised if later on down the road that kind of stuff starts to be linked to this rest protein. Another thing is when they say that patients with Alzheimer's have lower levels of this rest protein. One thing I do know that I've mentioned on this channel before is that Alzheimer's disease is these days often referred to as type 3 diabetes, which is kind of, you know, like diabetes of the brain. So it's associated with the same stuff like high levels of glucose, your body not able to regulate the amount of glucose in the bloodstream, and now it's causing damage to tissues and whatnot. Which to me, like I said, I wouldn't be surprised if lower levels of this are referred to as longevity boosting protein are associated with a diet that is very, very high in sugar and simple carbohydrates, stuff like that. So we'll see what happens down the road. Maybe I'll see another study that comes across like in the future about this. Main thing is what I've learned about longevity is, you know, we don't need all the food that we eat. It's good to fast sometimes, and then not to eat after a certain time at night. I have to do better with that, to be honest. These days, but that getting plenty of movement, building muscle, nurturing your relationships with people, having stress relieving kind of activities, practices like prayer and meditation, you know, these are kind of things that we can do that we know contribute to longevity. And we may not necessarily know all the mechanisms of that, but it's enough to know that you're nurturing your body and giving it what it needs. All right. So anyway, this is a longevity is always an interesting topic to me. But I'm gonna let that be it so I can get on to some other work. Remember, you guys can pop on here 10 o'clock weekdays, ask your health and fitness questions. I'll be glad to answer as best I can. Until next time, y'all take care. Have a good one.